As Brian Gaddie's favorite group, and mine too, I guess, Boys to Men would say, it's so hard to say goodbye to yesterday. So the legislature said, okay, we don't have to. We'll come back in May. And that's where we're going with the insiders today. Brian Gaddie, our Democratic insider, Abdul-Hakim Shabazz, conservative commentator, also at indypolitics.org. And the reason the legislature will be coming back in May is to presumably override Governor Holcomb's veto of House Bill 1041, the ban on transgender girls competing in girls' athletics at the high school level and below in the state of Indiana. We'll start with Abdul. Any surprise? Because I believe it was your presumption or your thought that the governor would sign this and not veto it. And instead, he waited until almost the last minute to pull out the veto pen here.
Well, my friend, it's nice to know that after almost 20 years of covering the legislature, I can still be surprised on occasion. So that means I haven't been here that long. I was somewhat surprised that the governor did decide he was going to veto the transgender athlete bill. Because, you know, it says that transgender athletes cannot participate in girls' sports. The governor cited a number of reasons for his veto. Number one, the state's going to get sued regardless by the ACLU. Number two, it seemed inconsistent that a transgender athlete can compete in a girl sport, but they could compete in a boy sport. And that it's one thing to have a rule that says no, transgender athletes can only participate in the sports of their birth, which is one thing I necessarily agree with, but at least that would be more intellectually consistent. And thirdly, Indiana does not have this problem. Doesn't have this problem at all. There's been no reported cases of transgender athletes trying to compete, particularly at the K through 12 level here in Indiana. And the IHSA actually has a system in place. They had a system in place for 10 years to deal with this issue. So once again, it was a solution looking for a problem that didn't really exist here in Indiana.
Brian, there have been a literal handful of areas where Democrats and Governor Holcomb have been on the same side, and this ended up being one of them.
Absolutely, and I'm very proud that Governor Holcomb vetoed this bill because we do not need to codify discrimination. Indiana is not the state for hate. We accept all Hoosiers, and Governor Holcomb did the right thing, and I'm glad he vetoed this bill. I'm very glad he did it.
Now, I would assume likelihood of an override, given the initial vote on this bill, is somewhere between really, really high and a slam dunk. Brian, not much that Democrats can do to stop that.
Well, we can actually, just like we did before, have people get out and go to the State House and voice their concerns as Hoosiers and exercise their First Amendment rights to freedom of assembly and put pressure on those state legislators to not try to codify discrimination into law. So I'm calling on all Hoosiers of goodwill that care about making sure that all Hoosiers are treated with respect under the law to get out and get out there and express your opinions at the General Assembly. And I think if enough Hoosiers show up in the hundreds or even the thousands, I think they'll back down. That's my hope.
Well, based, Abdul, on what House Speaker Houston said after the governor's veto, it didn't sound like it would matter how many people showed up at the State House to talk about this. He seemed fairly certain that an override is going to happen.
Yes, and the thing to keep in mind is that May 24th, which is the day scheduled for the veto override, lawmakers are going to come back anyway, what they call Technical Corrections Day. As they sort of go through legislation to dot the I's, cross the T's, change a there and a there and a here into a here, and just sort of make sure everything is technically accurate and correct. So that's kind of point number one. So I don't think there'll be a whole lot of people at the State House on Tuesday, May 22nd. As far as the veto being overridden, I think that's pretty much pretty much say it's going to happen in the House. Not sure yet what's going to happen over on the Senate side of things. I don't think Senator Bray has made it perfectly clear whether or not they're going to attempt to override the governor's veto or not. One thing I can say, though, has been a lot of pandering to a lot of folks in the far right of the Indiana Republican Party and of the conservative base here in Indiana. Because, like I said, once again, there's been no reports of any transgender athletes actually participating in girls' sports here in Indiana. It's a solution looking for a problem that doesn't exist. But once again, we got a very active conservative base. It's just one of those boxes that you check off, particularly when you got a primary coming up in 7 weeks.
Well, speaking of that aspect of it, what, Abdul, do you think does this do to the political future of Governor Holcomb? Because our working assumption is that he still has a committee out there raising money, even though he can't run for governor again. The assumption was that he was going to run for something, whether that's U.S. Senate or whatever in the future. What does a veto like this on an issue that has riled up that conservative base, not just in Indiana, but across the country in the Republican Party, what does that do for the governor's political future?
I think it makes it maybe changes the math a little bit because Eric, although he has some issues with some of the far right ideological conservative base of the Republican Party here in Indiana, he's still extremely popular with moderates, with independents, with Democrats, and with a good chunk of Republicans as well who don't eat and breathe this stuff the way that we do. So I don't worry too much about his political aspirations. As far as him raising money goes, that is more right now to help House and Senate candidates than it is for his own political future down the road.
Brian, is this an issue that Democrats can use to their advantage in elections this year, given that this is, regardless of what people think on this issue, the issue of transgender athletes would seem to be on the surface a very different issue and perhaps a little more polarizing than simply the rights of the LGBTQ plus community in general, as we went through during the RFRA debate?
I think as an issue, if we Democrats just talk about the fact that we should not be codifying discrimination into law, we can make that an overall issue. And I think that can help us as Democrats, not necessarily the transgender portion of it, but just saying, hey, as Democrats, we will never be for codifying discrimination. If the Republicans want to do that, that's on them, but we don't do that as Democrats. I think that's the way we should do it as an overall umbrella approach.
Something Republicans, including the governor, did codify this week was the bill that essentially gets rid of the permitting process or the need to have a permit to carry a handgun in Indiana. Abdul, there was some thinking that the governor might go along with the state police superintendent, who was very passionately against this bill, as were other police organizations. In the end, though, he sided with the Second Amendment, the gun rights portion of the party in signing this bill into law.
Yeah, and I think the main reason why the governor did is because he knew the bill was going to become law regardless. Whether he signed into law, whether he let it go into effect without a signature, whether he vetoed it, and the lawmakers overrode his veto, the bill was going to become law. So you may as well just go ahead and sign it and get over with, and put some safeguards in there. For example, with police training. Okay, now that we live in a new universe of permitless carry, here's how we have to approach each situation, because police work is already dangerous enough as it is, whether it's a routine traffic stop or whether you're just walking up on a potential domestic violence situation. We don't need to make lives of law enforcement officers that much more difficult. So I would not be surprised to see if there's some kind of training or something adjusted in law enforcement over the ILE Academy going forward. Number two, which I also think is interesting as well, with respect to permitless carry, the governor still encourages folks to get a permit if they're going to be traveling out of state. Because if you're going to be in a state that has reciprocity with the state of Indiana, which means if you have a license here, you can carry there, you're going to need your permit regardless.
Brian, how do Democrats handle this issue moving forward? Because this puts Democrats on the side of most police organizations, including the top cop in the state. But how do Democrats use this issue in a state that is very definitely pro-gun rights, pro-Second Amendment on the whole, it would seem, here in Indiana?
Well, we Indiana Democrats are pro-Second Amendment, pro-gun rights, but we're also pro-law enforcement. And as long as we emphasize the fact that we are on the side of law enforcement, we're on the side of making their jobs easier and safer, that is the political place to be for us Democrats. So it's just we are supporters of not only the Second Amendment, but we're also supporters of law enforcement. And you got the majority of law enforcement, IMPD, the Indiana State Police, that are coming out against this bill now. It's the law now that Governor Holcomb signed it. It's really troubling because it's just going to make the lives in state police, IMPD, and police officers all over the great state of Indiana more precarious, more dangerous. And it's just really unfortunate that Governor Holcomb signed this bill into law.
Abdul-Hakim, Shabazz, Brian Gaddie, our WRTV political insiders joining us this week. Let's move to Washington. We were talking about electoral prospects for Eric Holcomb a minute ago. The presumed wannabe successor, or one of them, had a moment, if you will, this week. in talking about the nomination of Ketanji Brown Jackson to be at the Supreme Court. That would be Senator Mike Braun. He was doing a conference call with reporters in which he was answering questions about Judge Jackson's qualifications. And the topic came around to how the Supreme Court handles making decisions and whether or not certain decisions should be left up to states. And he was asked by Dan Carton, our friend with the Times of Northwest Indiana, whether that would apply, in his opinion, to the 1967 decision that essentially legalized or barred states from making interracial marriage illegal. And Mike Braun agreed that it should, essentially saying that interracial marriage should be perhaps revisited or left up to the states. And he was asked the question several times, and he came back with the same answer. Then later, Senator Braun came back and tried to clarify his remarks. It would appear, Brian, that his explanation was he thought the conversation was about same-sex marriage, not interracial marriage, and that he was against racism in all forms. What kind of a moment was this for Senator Braun? Because a lot of us, Brian, thought of Richard Murdoch's moment during the Senate debate with Joe Donnelly a few years ago when talking about rape. I don't know if it was to that level, but what does this say about Senator Braun and his position, whatever that might be, on this issue, and of course his political prospects moving forward?
For Senator Braun, I've got a new nickname for you: all brawn, no brains. There's just no doubt about it. Mulligans are only for golf, not politics. So these Republicans have to understand that the new improved Indiana Democratic Party, we're going to hold you accountable when you make these blunders and these gaffes. But really, now that you think about it, was it really a gaffe? He said the same answer over and over again. And our good friend Abdul, as we all know, is an attorney, knows that Loving v. Virginia is settled law. So since when have we now said that, hey, that interracial marriage is not settled law, that is left up to the states? This obsession that Republicans have about states' rights, everything has to be handled at the state level, gets them into trouble a lot of times. And he got himself in trouble on this one. So if you're watching, which I know you are, Senator Braun, if you do decide to run for governor, this will be used against you. So you've been fair warned. It will be used against you as an issue. So all brawn, no brains. That's our new slogan for you.
Well, I mean, we do hope that Senator Braun is watching, as we hope everybody is watching. But Abdul, how much in the way of legs does something like this have, Abdul, when he says he was simply mistaken? I think about the question or misunderstood the question. We are a long way from Senator Braun running for anything else right now. Is this something that could be used against him in the future?
Yes. I mean, and Democrats would be insane not to use it. But first of all, let me just make a couple things perfectly clear. Number one, I've known Mike Braun for years. Mike Braun is not a racist. Let's just make that perfectly clear. Did Mike Braun say something really dumb, really stupid? Did use more brawn than brain at this juncture of the narrative? Yes, but is Mike Braun a racist? No, Mike Braun is not. That's kind of point number one. Point number two, I would say the only good thing about Mike Braun's statement that he did it in March of 2022, as opposed to, say, October of 2024, because had he done it then, he'd have a major issue on his hands. And classically, what happens is when these guys, it's something I learned in politics a long time ago. I used to work for the Illinois Attorney General. But some days you just need to stop talking and just shut up and stop talking, or at the very least, have a sort of patent response to questions like that. So the first thing you do is ask the reporter to repeat the question again, and because that way it gives you a couple of seconds to sort of think about it and go forward. Then number two, you say, hey, look, you know what? We've had decisions in this country about race a long time ago. That's settled, that's resolved. I'm talking about something completely different, and have a standard pat answer for that. Because otherwise, because the more you talk, the more you're going to do is just get yourself in trouble. And with all due respect to Mike, his response was actually almost sort of worse than his response to the first question, saying, well, I wasn't really paying attention, didn't understand the question. Like, you know what? Just stop talking.
Abdul, from a legal standpoint, could the argument be made, though, that Senator Braun was accurately describing what a lot of conservatives believe is judicial philosophy, that all of these issues, like whether it's interracial marriage, same-sex marriage, that all of those issues should indeed be left up to the states? And that's really what he believes, because that's my understanding of what conservative judicial philosophy has been for decades now.
Well, I think, it gets a little bit in the weeds here because a lot of things that are left up to the states falls under the 10th Amendment. The rights not enumerated in the Constitution are reserved to the states and the people. There's also 9th Amendment jurisprudence as well that basically says rights that aren't necessarily spelled out in the Constitution, you still have them. So that's sort of that right there. But issues like race, that's been decided a long time ago, at least 56 years ago, that there's only a damn fool would basically try to go back down that road. Again, saying no, the federal government, the federal government should decide racial issues and let the states decide. No, that's not gonna happen for a number of reasons, and me and Brian's melanin are two of them right there.
Exactly. Like I said, Braun, no brains. All Braun, no brains. That's your new that's the new moniker that we're gonna hang on you, Senator Braun.
We're gonna have to hear that every week, aren't we, Brian? Yeah.
We're gonna hear that. I'm going to insist that my party uses it. We Indiana Democrats, we have a tendency of being too nice, but niceness you don't need to be nice in business or politics. You need to win, and that's what we need to start doing in this state. So all Braun, no brains.
Well, very quickly, one issue where we don't have a winner or a loser yet. Well, obviously, the losers have been the Ukrainian people, but that unfortunate situation continues. We're into month 2 now of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And Brian, it's almost as if, or it feels right now, as if we're kind of at a stalemate where Russian troops have only been able to get so far. Ukrainians are fighting back, of course, with the help of the international community. How does this reverberate in Indiana, besides, of course, the fact that we do have high gas prices still, even though they've come down in Indiana a little bit? It's going to affect our economy long term. But at the same time, this is half a world away, and this is one issue, at least, where on the surface, Democrats and Republicans still remain united against Russia for the most part.
Well, Democrats and Republicans, we do remain united on this one issue, except for the Putin wing, or as I call them, the Gaga over Putin wing of the Republican Party that's led by Donald Trump, which I will say Donald Trump, just like all Braun, no brains, has made a major gaffe coming out for Putin. We, again, like I said before, we support the underdogs, not the bullies. So this is an issue that I think will resonate in favor of the Democrats. And I'll tell you why, because we Democrats are being led by the strong leadership of President Biden. President Biden has put thousands of soldiers into Poland. He's moving soldiers into, I believe, Romania, the Baltic states. So there's going to be a strong U.S. Army NATO presence in Eastern Europe. And Putin should know not 1 inch westward toward NATO. Obviously, I don't want World War III, but at the same time, we must stand strong against this tyrant, this dictator, this, as the quote President Biden, this thug. He is a thug, and we need to stand strong against him, because when you don't, the dictators see that as a sign of weakness, and it only makes them even more aggressive. So President Biden is standing strong and standing tall. Just like a previous Democratic president, one of my heroes, JFK, stood strong and tall against the Russians. So is President Biden. He's doing the same thing, standing strong and standing tall.
Very quickly, Abdul, we got less than a minute. How does this affect politics here at home in Indiana, if it does, or is it still way too early to tell? It seems like this has been going on longer than a month now.
First of all, it's way too early to tell what the impact is going to be on the midterm elections here, particularly here in Indiana. But one thing I will say this. I think it's an important thing to keep in mind. I think the Russians may have bitten off a little bit more than they can chew. It's been estimated they've lost anywhere from 10 to 15,000 troops in the last month. In the 20-year Afghanistan-Iraq conflict, the United States only lost 7,000 troops. So just to keep that in mind and in perspective, I think the Russians have bitten off a little bit more than they can chew. And if we can keep arming the Ukrainians with weapons, Stinger missiles, the whole 9 yards, I think it's going to be once again their version of Vietnam Part 2.
Our political insiders, Abdul-Hakim, Shabazz, Brian, Gaddie. We will do it again next week and in the coming weeks, because primary season's on the way. It's going to be here before we know it. Cannot wait. Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Ray.
Hey, come on now. Said it last week, this show is rated PG. As you can probably tell by the blue content there, today is the day of the green, St. Patrick's Day. You could spend it quietly with the great Michal Omira Hartig making you the perfect sandwich.
Peace, ale, and chin. agus písa eile ar an daobh sin.
Or you could do as WRTV legend Reed Duffy did 41 years ago and spend a loud, somewhat debaucherous religious holiday with the great Gordon Pipers. So loud, our old videotape machines had to shake out the cobwebs, apparently, and they hadn't even had anything to drink yet. The Gordon Pipers had a full day of, activities every St. Patrick's Day, all because of their founder, a Canadian veterinarian turned Hoosier.
The Gordon Pipers have been an essential part of St. Patrick's Day in the city since 1962, when Dr. Wallace Gordon Deal founded this windy organization. Before the celebration ends, they will have found their way to 15 watering holes throughout the city, luring till about 3 in the morning. They tuned up at the brand new Union Jack and Speedway, where they'll wind up about midnight, no doubt in peak condition and feeling no pain. Such is the lure of the bagpipe, one of mankind's oldest, most traditional instruments, especially in Scotland, where most are made and tenaciously cherished, as Dr. Deal found out one day in 1954, when his wife sought to purchase a used bagpipe from a Scottish dealer in his native Canada.
So she goes into the store, and an old Scotsman comes out and he says, "Can I help you, lassie?" And she says, "Well, yes, I'm kind of looking for a used set of bagpipes." What? He says, "There's no such thing as a used set of bagpipes." He says, "They're a personal matter." And he had her in tears. So he told her, "Well, you got to buy a practice chanter and a book and learn. And when you can play 5 tunes on that practice chanter, we'll think about selling you a set of bagpipes."
Thankfully, Dr. Deal learned his 5 songs, got his precious pipes, and got others to join along with him. And just like the mayor doing goofy waves and dances and this dude in the wig and the kilt, really, man? Really? The Gordon Pipers, to this day, remain a cherished Indianapolis tradition. So Sheena Gabbay with Throwback Thursday, Ray Steele, WRTV.